All right, everybody, welcome back to Work-Life Harmony. You know, I'm super particular about guests that we bring on this show, and I'm thrilled to have Michelle Vroom here with us today. I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a minute, but I know sometimes you guys probably get a little tired of hearing my perspective and all the systems I'm using to juggle work, motherhood, all of that. So when I have an opportunity to bring someone else on the show to give some fresh perspective, share what's working for them, I just think it's a great win-win for all. So that is what we're going to be chatting about here today. Michelle, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Vroom. I am a business owner. I've been running my own business for 5.5 years now. I'm a boy mom times three. I have three boys at home, ranging from ages 1 to 6. So it is never a dull moment. So I totally love talking about anything, work-life balance. I come from a corporate background. So I come from a world where, there wasn't a lot of balance. There wasn't a lot of harmony by any means. And that's something that I've really been pursuing recently in my life, pursuing more freedom, not just when, on the business side of things, but also on the family side of things too. It's so easy for me as a mom to like lose my identity in everything that's going on and, having kids and growing a business. And so I'm excited just to chat about this subject. I think it's so important.
Oh, so much of everything you just said, particularly about, experiences with corporate and then losing our
Yep.
identity. I remember even after my daughter was born, I was still in corporate full time, but was at home. I'd had a work from home situation for a very long time there with that job, but was also building a business. And even the simple change of, I honestly didn't know how to dress anymore
Mm,
because I was like, okay, I had my work identity, like my clothes. I was corporate Megan, and then I was sweatpant Megan, right? That was it. But then introducing my daughter into it, I'm like, well, we go to the park sometimes when I'm done with work. Like, I don't even know how to dress to accommodate work and then playtime. It sounds so silly looking back, but I'm like, so much of it is all that identity, right? And how we navigate that. So I would love for you to kind of paint the picture of what does a typical, and I know it's funny to say that, particularly with three, my husband is one of three boys. So the stories I hear are
yeah.
of his
Yeah.
childhood are pretty funny. What
Yep.
does a typical day look like for you and how you're spending your time?
Yeah. So typical day looks like waking up at like 6:37, getting the kids up for school, getting my older two boys off to school. I drive them to school every day because they're at a private school. And then depending on if that's a day when I have childcare for the youngest, then I will go straight home and kind of go into work mode, which is what I'm doing right now. I have very focused periods of work time because I also pick up my boys in the afternoons. And there's a lot of kind of running around just in this stage of life that we're in. And so I've really had to get very disciplined about like when and how I work and, making sure that I protect my calendar and when people book calls with me. Like I'm a coach, so a lot of my business coach, so a lot of my, work is being on calls with people, being on Zoom calls. And so really protecting my time. And I think the biggest thing I'll say is you're absolutely right. It's never the same, right? Every single day.
Right.
And I remember kind of earlier this year, like resisting that and being really upset by that and almost
Mm.
being like, well, I want it to be more normal. And then I realized this is my normal right now.
Yeah.
Everything's a season, but this is my normal. And as soon as I started kind of accepting that, that's when like it actually got easier, right? Because I stopped
Yeah.
resisting what was already happening. After I pick the kids up from school, I go home, spend some time with them, play outside. We walked around the neighborhood last night and looked at all the Christmas lights that were up, like just fun things like that. And then my husband actually prepares dinners for us. So I don't have to do
Ooh,
that, which is
nice.
awesome. He's actually a better cook than I am. And that was something
My
that
husband is too.
yeah, like I fought traditional roles, right? I was like, I have to do it all. I have to do the cooking. And he was like, do you though? Like, it's okay if I do it. And so he preps it, I stick it in, he gets home and we, eat together as a family. And then we go straight into like getting the kids down and all of that. In this season, actually in this month that we're recording this, I don't have a babysitter. I have a new babysitter who's starting in the new year. And so I am doing some work after hours, whereas normally I wouldn't. And that's okay too, right? Like I'm making that okay. It doesn't mean that, something's wrong. Like it's just this season, this particular, month. And so, that's kind of what balance, I'm using quotes around that, but that's kind of what balance looks like for me right now in my day to
So,
day.
so much of what you just shared is, I know that our listeners are hearing it, but I know that there are some undercurrents that they're probably missing that I really want to point out that I think is so important. You and I share a very similar schedule. I just get up earlier because I do like mornings, and if I don't get 30 minutes to myself before my kids wake up,
Right.
that's just not good for me personally.
Right.
But first, I love the fact that you did not say you're getting up at 4:30 in the morning.
No.
Because so many women in this season of life are like, well, the only way I can have that is to sacrifice my sleep. So right there, I get up by choice at 5:30. You're not even getting up that early. And then we both have a similar, drive my daughter to school, and then I'm picking her up. And once we're home from school, work is not happening. And you talked about being super intentional with that small window of time that is yours to get work done. How do you go about prioritizing what you're doing so that you can maximize that very tiny window of time?
Yeah, I have 3 priorities for the week.
Okay. I love
And
that.
that's what I focus on. That's what I focus on. So
And how do you pick those? Do you have a system that you're using right now that helps?
I don't have a system. It's really truly based on like, what are my goals and what am I working toward in my business right now? I will say this, I have a team, which is super helpful. I didn't always have a team though. And even when I do have a team, like I still am responsible for certain things, and I need to make sure that what I'm focused on is actually directly related to what our goals are. So what are the goals that I have in the next 30 days? What are the goals that I have in the next 60 days, and so on and so on. And so I pick 3 priorities for the week, and those are the things that I focus on. Anything else that I do is just kind of a nice to have. One thing that I did actually yesterday that I think is also helpful is kind of drilling down like, okay, so there's 3 priorities for the week, but what are the 3 things that I want to do each day? And they're not 3 business things and then 3 personal things. There are 3 things, both business and personal. And so, I mean, this is super simple. I want to share it because I want people to see like, I don't have to be, you don't have to be super organized and have all these different systems, but in the notes section of my phone, I literally put like, okay, on Wednesday, what are the things that I'm focused on? Thursday, what are the things that I'm focused on? So even like taking the overall priorities, making sure that they're part of those things. And then each day having 3 things. And so tomorrow, there's 2 business things on there, but then there's 1 personal thing, right? Like that being the stuff that I focus on each day, and only getting done those things and kind of letting go of the rest.
Oh, that's so important. I know I've talked a lot about, why I hate these never ending to-do lists that people are looking at all day long. Like, the beginning of the week, all right, here's the 73 things I'm going to get done this week. And then every day you're looking at that. It's overwhelming, and less is so much more powerful. And I know for me, when people ask, how do I continue to get, what looks like so much done in such small amounts of time? And my answer is always because I'm doing less. Similar to you, there's very few things on my calendar in a given week, but that's how I get them done to completion, because you've got to let the rest go. Let's circle back on, you're talking about the fact that right now you don't have the childcare for your youngest. I love highlighting that, we can set boundaries with our time. And it sounds like you and I, again, also similar on, we usually don't work at night. That's not a good thing for me, for my family, for anybody. But sometimes things pop up that put us in a position to say, well, I have a choice to make right here. And maybe my choice is for this small window, I am going to say yes to something I usually say no to, because there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it is what feels okay in this moment. And so how do you go about deciding for yourself when you may need to, make some adjustments to what your dream schedule is versus what you may need to step into for a window of time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, looking at like, what does this season require of me? Like family will always come first. Family will always come first. What does the season require of me? So when my husband, and I involve my husband in all of this because I need a sounding board. Like I need to be able to talk through everything with him. And so anytime I've made changes to my schedule or anything, I literally print it out. I walk over to him. We arrange a time to talk about it, and we sit down and like map it out together. So having that teamwork has been super, super helpful. But like for example, with this month with the babysitter, I mean, we knew what was happening. We knew it was coming. We knew that we wouldn't have a babysitter for this month. And so we looked at his schedule, his availability, which is significantly less flexible than mine.
Yeah.
And we looked at sort of, it being a holiday month and like what I really wanted from the month. And I was like, you know what? I want to take less time. Like I want to take more time to be with my kiddos. I actually want to, have things be a little bit slower. And I was okay with that. And so I think some of it also comes down to like, what are your non-negotiables? And so for me, obviously my kids are always the non-negotiable, my family. And also looking at like, what do I want from this season? There are other times, in other periods throughout the year where there's a lot going on from a business perspective. And that means that my husband's going to have to pick up a little more slack at home because there's certain things that I have to devote time to. I think where it gets tricky is a lot of people don't know what their non-negotiables are. They don't know what they're willing to compromise on and what they're not willing to compromise on. And I have even like had those lines get a little bit blurry as well myself, and have really had to every single season, every time we bring a new child into the family, or anytime, now this is a new season with both of my older boys in full-time school. Like, what does this season require from us? What do I truly want? And being honest with myself. There's also been times where I'm like, I want to work more. I want the babysitter. And I felt guilt about that before, right? Like that mom guilt comes up all the time. So I think it's knowing those non-negotiables, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. And I love that you're even highlighting. I think people feel like if you set your non-negotiables, particularly as a family, that then like that becomes etched in stone and can't change.
They change all the time.
Yeah, they've got to, because
you have to be willing to let them change.
Yeah. And particularly the younger your kids are, things are changing so rapidly that what was your non-negotiable, or what your whole family leaned into, all of a sudden a year later, everything can look completely different. I mean, I'm particularly thinking back even with the pandemic when we were first in lockdown, talk about scratching all of my non-negotiables and starting over, because everything was in such a disarray at that point. And I love that you even highlighted there are seasons where you're leaning in to work maybe more because there's something going on that you're really excited about, versus saying, hey, I want to slow down right now and not. And I think that is a beautiful illustration of the harmony side, because I think so many, this is why I keep telling people, like, step away from feeling that everything has to be balanced, meaning that equal time, that equal attention every single day, week, month, because that isn't likely going to serve you well as you need to pivot and navigate through those, different seasons and stages when something may rise up and be a higher priority, and to be okay with the fact that we're allowed to have those things as moms. Like, we're allowed to have priorities that aren't just attached to our children as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I didn't tell you we were going to talk about this, but I'm just curious for my own. Can you share a little bit about your journey from deciding to leave a corporate career to pursue being an entrepreneur for full time?
Absolutely. So I knew that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. That was definitely, something that was on my heart, but I thought it would be when I was in my 50s and the kids were older. Like I had all this, this vision of what that was going to look like. And then I had my oldest child and everything changed. I didn't want to commute anymore. I wanted to be home more, but I still wanted to have a career. I still wanted to utilize my talents. And so, while I was on maternity leave with my oldest son, opportunities started coming my way through like family and friends of family and like the tight, sort of knit circle there. And enough opportunities came my way where I was like, you know what, I could do this now. And I had a decision to make, like, am I going to take that leap of faith? Because at the time I was the breadwinner. We have, a newborn at home. Like, it on paper, it did not look like a good time to leave. But my husband and I sat down and talked about it. There were some sacrifices that we were willing to make for the freedom that I would have to be able to be with my son, but also still grow my business. And I think I went back to work maybe a month or two, and then I left and went full time. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I knew for me, like, I know there are a lot of people who, and I have some clients like this who are still working their 9 to 5 while growing like a 6-figure business. For me, I knew that with a baby at home, trying to work 2 different jobs, like, was not going to be sustainable for me. And so I was willing to kind of make that financial sacrifice and take that big, scary leap a lot sooner than maybe I would have, for the sake of my own mental sanity.
Yeah, that's a really, It's a powerful example of weighing both, the checks and balances, pros and cons of there are sacrifices that are made anytime someone steps into starting their own business. And I hate to use the word sacrifices because I think it has a very negative connotation to it, simply by definition of the word. But I think maybe if we think of it more as there are choices that one needs to make between oftentimes time versus money. I think for a lot of people, it comes down to that, and to lean into whatever choice you make and just say, I'm going all in on that. And for some people, it may look like, hey, for 1 year, I'm going to sacrifice some time and just, double down and work and build this business and have that end date, versus for some of us, it might be hey, you know what? I'm going to find some creative budgeting so that I don't have to do the time. And so maybe then, for a year, the finances side just gets managed a little bit different until we grow that out. But having that awareness of thought of what is the choice you're making, and then how are you going to actually set foot and own that, and then just go all in at that point. Because I think it's when you're on the fence trying to say nothing's going to change, but I'm going to have both, is when things end up going south a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You definitely have to lean in for sure.
And I probably shouldn't say lean in, because that creates a whole nother assumption of
right. Just be committed to where you're at in the season.
Oh, I love that. So good. If you could give one tip to anyone out there right now listening who may be in a similar situation as you were, where they're wanting more of that time freedom, more of having the control of their life, maybe to be with their children or pursue other passions, whatever that is, what would you say to them as they're thinking about how to actually get started? Because I know this is an area of which is kind of your zone of genius here.
Yeah. So I think that number one, you have to look at what's holding you back, because we know what we want. I think most people do know what they want. They're just afraid to actually say it out loud or pursue it, right? Because maybe they feel like they don't deserve it, or they feel guilty or scared, right? Like, will I like this if I achieve this? What happens if I don't? Or will people look at me differently? I mean, there's so many like facets here. So I think you have to obviously, get clear on what it is that you want, but then look at what's holding you back from going after that thing. Usually for most people, it's some type of fear, right? Of stepping out of their comfort zone and maybe making a change. And so looking at what that is, I truly believe that you have to face that fear, that you have to look at it and examine it and understand where it's coming from and what are you afraid will happen and what does that mean, in order to start to take steps to actually pursue what you want. Because usually it's the fear that's blocking us. And so I think that's got to be the first thing that people really look at. Like, what is holding me back? If I say that I want this and I know that I want it, and maybe I've been thinking about it for a long while, like, what's holding me back? I mean, even just thinking about, my dream of being an entrepreneur, telling myself that I wouldn't be able to achieve that until I was in my 50s and the kids were older. Well, that right away indicates that there was a belief that with young children, you can't, build your own business. Like, you don't have enough time. And so really examining kind of my perspective and beliefs around time and like what I was afraid of not having enough time for the business, but also afraid of not having enough time for the kids. And once I started kind of like looking at that fear and acknowledging it, it became a little bit less scary. It didn't take it away completely, but it became a little less scary. And that's when I was able to say, well, wait a second, like, how can I make this work for me? And how can I do this differently? Because most of us live in the land of absolutes where it's like, there's only two options. I either, do this or I don't do. And it's like, well, are there other options? Right? Yeah. Are there other options? And so I think getting really clear about the fear and then looking at all of your options really allows you to make sure that you're taking steps in the direction that you actually want.
Oh, that's so good. So good. So where can everybody find you, connect with you, learn more about what you're doing? And do you have anything going on in the new year that you'd like to share as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to connect with me is inside of the Market Like a Boss Facebook group, is where I show up, obviously on the business side of things. So if someone listening is a business owner, that's a great place to be. There's over 6,400 women in there. Yeah. And then I also talk a lot about like my life as a mom on Instagram. So Market Like a Boss as in Michelle, V as in Vroom. So Market Like a Boss, MV. That's where I share, kind of stories, about being a mom, running a business. I have every single week a Friday fails thread. So what did you fail at this week? And you celebrate the failures because those are going to happen too. Yep. So that's the best place to hang out with me. I do have some fun things that I'll be introducing in the new year for business owners that will be happening inside of the Facebook group Market Like a Boss. So definitely check that out. Nothing specific that I'm going to mention here, but there's some things that we're planning that I think will be, some stuff coming that I think will be really good. And then, again, for those of you who aren't in business, but just want to see what it's like to, be a mom of 3 crazy boys running a business, like the best place to go is definitely, I think, on Instagram.
Awesome. Yeah. And I would say, the reason why I think having you showing up so authentically, sharing your real life is so important. I think there's still that overarching kind of Gary V hustle, hustle, hustle mentality, which I absolutely hate. And so for anyone listening that is having that same, like, oh, I have these dreams. And even if it's not a business, maybe it's the health journey you want to take on, the book you wanted to write, whatever it is. And you're thinking, you've got those limiting beliefs around that time aspect. I would highly encourage you to connect with Michelle over on Instagram, watch what's going on, because as you heard here today, she is not working 95 hours a week and sacrificing herself along this journey. And I think the more that we can talk about this as women and inspire others to say, it doesn't have to look the way you think it does. And you can actually, have these things that you desire along with a family and do it in a way that doesn't completely sacrifice yourself is so important. So thank you for taking this time out to be here today, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
I definitely am just inspired by watching all that you do.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a really fun conversation.